October 17th, it was gorgeous. It was sunny and beautiful.
Indian weather, they called it. Indian weather.
No, Indian summer.
Indian.
It was beautiful
fall.
because usually around 3:30 in San Francisco, the winds come in at Candlestick and it's blustery. But this was shirt sleeve weather. You didn't even need to bundle up. So it was a beautiful day. The skies were blue. It was a gorgeous day. We went to the Bay Bridge Toll Plaza. You could drive right up. There was no other cars there.
No waiting.
There was no waiting.
This is the only time I've never had no waiting.
There was no waiting.
I remember I had just got out of school. I'm not quite sure around what time the earthquake happened, but I know it had to have been in the afternoon because I just got out of school, and I remember my mom had just got off of work, and me and my stepdad were going to pick my mom up and his mother, who worked downtown. So we had picked my mom up, and we were maybe 2nd Street picking up his mother from work, and we were waiting for her to come out of her building. And I remember my mom drove a Hyundai, a red Hyundai at the time. I was in the back seat. My mom was driving. My stepdad was outside, and he was like leaning over the car. The door was open. He was leaning over the car, and he was shaking the car. My mom was like, "Quit shaking the car. What are you shaking the car for?" So he stopped shaking it. And then about maybe like 2 or 3 minutes later, it was shaking again. And my mom said, "Didn't I tell you to stop shaking the car?" But he was like, "I'm not shaking it. It's an earthquake." And we was like, "An earthquake?"
Well, I was sitting in my office, which was not this one, but it was down the hall. And I was sitting with a student, having office hours. And, things really started to move. I mean, the bookcases, which are now bolted to the wall, then were not, and they were swaying. I thought they were going to come down. The lights were swinging. The student just ran out into the hall screaming. And I was in the doorway, and I kept yelling to her, "Get out from under the lights," because I was afraid one of the lights was going to come down. And I don't know, she disappeared into the elevator or the stairwell or somewhere. And, and then the shaking stopped. And, well, we were here. I mean, we were in Berkeley. The power did not go out. So I went back to work. The student never came back, but I was just sitting in my office working. And my husband, who was also a professor in another department, came by, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes later and said, somebody's got a radio. Remember, this was before the internet. Somebody's got a radio. And apparently this was a really big earthquake. The Bay Bridge has collapsed. We'd better get out of this building in case there's an aftershock.
Since we were downtown, and as a kid, I'm thinking that all the buildings are going to collapse on us. So I remember crying in the back seat saying, "Let's get out of here. Let's get out of here."
Well, it was really creepy. We got to Candlestick, but had to park way in the back. And it was 5:04. Game time was at 5:30 or something. But it was way before 5:04 because that's when it hit. So we parked somewhere like around 4:50 and then made it to the front of the ballpark, in the ballpark, and at the concession stand. The lines were really long, and so this one was short for all the long lines. So I got my place in line, and it was my turn. And when I was at the counter ordering, all of a sudden the ground just started to shake and roll, and then I felt a calmness, like God said it was going to be okay. So I didn't have that adrenaline rush and then freak out. I had a sense of calm. It was a spiritual moment for me.
I had a different experience.
Yeah.
Robin and I were standing in line, and we had waited the whole time. It was a long line, even though it was the shortest one.
Yeah.
And we got up right to the counter, and right before the earthquake hit, there was a sound you could hear in the air. And when earthquakes come, they come in waves. And it's called the P wave and the S wave. And I think the P wave comes first, and it's not shaking. It's more harmonic frequency, and you could actually hear that before the ground started to shake. And then the ground started shaking, and glassware started clinking, and things started moaning and groaning, and cement started buckling and swaying. And it was very scary to be in that stadium with all this building around you, just moving around like child's toys. So the first instinct I had was to run out from underneath the cement, which was to cling to the fence like every other sane person in the stadium.
Hey, I didn't want to lose my place in line.
Every sane person was trying to get out from
You
underneath
looked like I was crazy.
And, but it wasn't like you could run and trample anybody because you were being bounced around by the earthquake, so it was kind of mayhem.
And then the lady in the snack bar was going, okay, everybody calm down, it'll be okay, just settle down, because people were all, ugh. And then I turned around to look at Kurt, and he was like 18 feet away. He had ran, left me.
I didn't ran,
And I turned around, and he had this stunned look on his face, like, why didn't you run? And it was like, well, I didn't need to. I felt calm. And then so I got our drinks, the earthquake was over, and then when Kurt came back over to talk to this total stranger on my anniversary, just grabbed me and kissed me, and then so it was like a whole culmination of really weird stuff going on all at once. I was waiting for Rod Serling to come by and, tell me it's the Twilight Zone. But Kurt was pretty panicked, and he ran, and I stayed calm. And so that's why we have different accounts.
And so me being 7 years old, I just was like, earthquake, and I kind of panicked. But I remember my mom being cool about it. She wasn't really like, she's never in panic mode. Next thing I know, it was kind of surreal because even though it was an earthquake and I was young, I didn't really know what kind of impact it would have. Later on, of course, I figured it out. I don't know how much time it went by, but his mom had finally came out from her job and she was like, and everybody's panicking, like, let's go, let's get out of the city, it's earthquake. So we immediately, I don't know how long we waited for her to come out, but after she got in the car, we tried to get on the bridge. Luckily, we tried to get on Bryant Street, right there on the ramp. And it was already police there. And they were like, no, we're not letting anybody on the bridge. We didn't know at the time that part of the bridge had collapsed. So like if the police wouldn't have been there, we probably would have been on the bridge and Lord knows.
It sounds like a moan, kind of like a whale song. A low-pitched whale song.
A humpback whale?
Yeah.
A humpback whale.
Exactly. Yeah.
We went back to our seats and decided, well, if it shakes again, I'll meet you out by second base. Like we'd be able to get to second base. They wouldn't let anybody on the field. But that was our plan. And my brother-in-law had given us a little portable TV to look at. And so we sat in our seats and we got the TV out and started to look at it.
It was the original Sony Watchman.
It was interesting because we were looking at the bridge we just went over and a big slab was missing. It was like, whoa. All of a sudden, we turned around behind us and there was like rows of people looking at our little TV all over our shoulder, just tripping out, going, wow.
And the drive was quite remarkable because you come down off of the Golden Gate Bridge and, normally you see this beautiful view of San Francisco. It was black. It was, all the power was out. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. You couldn't see anything because there was no lights. And you come off the bridge and at every intersection, there were people out with flashlights directing traffic. I remember this was midnight already. So people had been doing this for hours and hours, just strictly volunteer. We got to Noe Valley, got to our street, and our neighbors cheered when we drove up. They were all out in the street barbecuing the food in their refrigerator because, the power was out, so they figured it was going to spoil. They had a television sitting on the top of a Volkswagen Bug, sort of plugged into the Volkswagen battery. And this was the scene that night.
I didn't really understand all the changes fully. And as I've gotten older and, living in the city, I've seen the changes. Like there's freeways that don't exist. Like you used to be able to go down Phil and hop right on the freeway. That freeway got messed up during an earthquake and they never rebuilt it.
It was devastating when you found out what happened in Oakland.
Oh, yeah, it was. It was very devastating. Very devastating.
They said the freeway had smashed.
And they were showing pictures of that on the news. And
it was real disturbing.
Yeah.
It was real heartbreaking because there was kids. And the really cosmic thing, 60 people died in that thing because the freeway pancaked on itself. And all the people that were going out of Oakland towards San Francisco got crushed. The ironic thing is Billy Graham, he's this big religious leader, he said that if the A's and the Giants weren't both in the World Series, there would have been a lot more deaths. Just the mere fact that both baseball teams that were in the Bay Area were in the World Series, that kept people off the streets and everything. It was quite the miracle, kind of really interesting thing. But the Oakland part was the hard part.
The Embarcadero, beautiful again, right? With buildings and parks and all of this stuff and the tear down of the hideous Embarcadero Freeway. I mean, that was a positive change that came out of Loma Prieta.